Amara Williams woke before sunrise, the soft glow of her alarm clock painting the bedroom walls in pale orange light. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her younger brother, Marcus, who still slept soundly under a thick quilt. Their small apartment was home to their mother, Caroline, who worked long hours at the hospital, and to the gentle hum of life in a neighborhood that carried both warmth and worry. Amara stretched, touching the cool wood floor with her bare toes, and stepped quietly into the living room. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and on the coffee table sat an open notebook filled with Amara's neat handwriting. She used that notebook to plan her day, to sketch out thoughts about school projects, or to write down lines of poetry that came to her suddenly. At 16, she was bright and thoughtful, a girl who read her textbooks with the same curiosity she reserved for stories of history's great peacemakers. Yet lately her mind felt stretched thin by worries she could hardly name. Outside, the sound of traffic mingled with the chatter of neighbors opening their doors to go about their mornings. Amara wrapped a scarf around her neck. It was still cold in the early hour and slipped on her worn sneakers. She took a deep breath of crisp air, the scent of damp earth and distant jasmine clinging to the night's last moments. School lay 2 blocks away, familiar red brick building where her teachers praised her focus and her classmates sometimes teased her for being too serious. She believed that learning was a gift, and she carried that belief in her heart like a secret treasure. As she locked the apartment door behind her, she noticed 2 police cars parked under the street lamp. Their lights were off, but their presence felt heavy. A uniformed officer stood by the building's entrance, talking in a low voice with a woman whose eyes looked worried. Amara paused. She had never thought of police knocking on her family's door, not here, where most mornings began with laughter and the smell of oatmeal. Her footsteps slowed as she approached. The officer glanced up at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Amara Williams?" he asked. His tone was polite but firm. Amara swallowed hard, feeling an unexpected dryness in her mouth. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. "That's me." He showed her a badge clipped to his belt. There's something we need to talk about," he said, "about an incident last night at the community center." The community center was a place Amara knew well. She often volunteered there, helping younger kids with homework and organizing art classes. She loved the bright walls painted with murals of families planting gardens, of children reading books under tall trees. The idea that violence could touch that place felt impossible. "May I come in?" he asked, before she could answer her. Mother appeared behind her, tying her own coat. Caroline's eyes were wide but brave. Amara felt a surge of protectiveness for her mother, who had always been her rock. "Officer, what's this about?" Caroline asked, her voice calm. The officer hesitated, then explained that there had been a fight at the community center. 2 men had clashed over a small argument and one of them ended up badly hurt. He said that an eyewitness had claimed they saw a girl matching Amara's description helping someone escape. "We need to question you as an accessory after the fact," he said. Accessory after the fact. The words echoed in Amara's mind. She thought of last night. She'd gone home early, doing extra homework for her biology test. She'd read her notes until her eyes grew heavy, then drifted to sleep. She had nothing to do with any fight. Yet here she was, accused of a crime she did not commit. Inside the apartment, Amara's brother tiptoed into the living room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Caroline knelt down and held his hand, offering him a reassuring smile. "Everything is okay, baby," she whispered. Marcus believed her, but Amara saw the worry crease her mother's forehead. The officer asked questions. Where had Amara been last night? Who could confirm her story? They took her fingerprints, though she sat still, as a statue, repeating her timeline. Home by 7, studying in her room until 10, lights out at 11. She mentioned her neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, who often checked on her in the evening. The officer nodded, making notes in a small notepad. After what felt like hours, they left with promises to return, to keep Amara updated. The apartment door closed behind them, and Caroline collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Amara sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her mother's shoulders. Marcus climbed into Amara's lap, asking if everything would be okay. Amara smiled, even though her stomach churned. She had to believe they would find the truth. At school that morning, Amara moved like a ghost through familiar hallways. Students who normally greeted her with smiles now stared in silence, whispers spreading like ripples on water. She reached her first class and took her seat, her heart still racing. The teacher, Ms. Harvey, called attendance, and when she reached Amara's name, she asked quietly, "Are you all right?" Amara nodded, even though she felt far from it. She opened her notebook, but her mind wandered to the idea of justice, of how a single mistaken witness could threaten someone's entire future. She wondered what would happen next. Would she have to go to court? Would people believe her? By lunchtime, the rumors had grown louder. Some students said they saw her near the community center's parking lot. Others claimed she'd spoken angrily to the victim before the fight. Amara kept her head down, chewing her sandwich in silence. She thought of the video camera at the cafe across the street, the one she'd passed each day on her way to school. The camera had footage of her walking home at 7:30 alone, carrying a stack of books. That evidence could prove her innocence, if only someone would look. When Caroline arrived at the principal's office to pick Amara up early, the principal looked troubled. "I want to help," he said softly. "I've always appreciated your dedication here. I'll speak to the police. Show them the security footage from the front door." Amara's heart leaped. At least someone believed her. That night, at home, Amara and Caroline reviewed their plan. They would ask Mrs. Delgado to confirm the time she saw Amara in the hallway. They would contact the cafe manager for the security tape. They would gather every scrap of proof to show she was nowhere near the crime. Amara felt a spark of hope, like a small flame in the darkness, yet fear lingered. She thought of the judge. She might face the cold benches of a courtroom, the stern eyes of people who might see her as guilty before hearing her side. She imagined standing in a wooden box, her voice caught in her throat. What if no one believed her? What if the video was too grainy, or the witness too convincing? That doubt crept in as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. She gripped her notebook, the pages soft under her fingertips. Then she remembered her vows to speak her truth, no matter how small her words. She pressed her hand over her heart and whispered, "I will not let them define me by a lie." Outside, the moon shone brightly over quiet streets. Inside, Amara closed her eyes, determined to rest. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more challenges, but she would face them because she could not let fear win. She would gather her evidence, share her story, and stand firm in her innocence. And in that promise lay the first line of her true defense, that she had nothing to hide except her unwavering faith in the truth. The morning of Amara's court hearing arrived with an uneasy stillness in the apartment. Caroline moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing oatmeal for Marcus while glancing at the clock. The pale light of dawn seeped in through the blinds, and Amara sat at the small kitchen table, her notebook open before her. She leaned over its pages, reviewing the notes she had written the night before. The time Mrs. Delgado saw her in the hallway, the cafe camera location, the list of questions she hoped to ask. Marcus ate slowly, peering at his sister with wide eyes. He wore his favorite red sweatshirt, a gift from Amara, on his last birthday. "Will you be okay today?" he asked, voice soft. Amara smiled and ruffled his hair. "I'll be fine, little one. I have people on my side." She thought of her teacher, the principal, her mother, even Mrs. Delgado, who had promised to come to court and speak for her. That support warmed her like sunshine on a chilly morning. Carolyn served Amara a bowl of oatmeal. "Eat," she urged. "Atch! You need strength." Amara nodded and spooned the warm grains into her mouth. Each bite calmed her trembling hands. The oatmeal tasted plain, but she welcomed its comfort. Silence filled the room, broken only by the gentle clink of spoons against ceramic. A clock. They left the apartment. Caroline held Marcus's hand, while Amara carried her notebook and a folder of documents. The walk to the courthouse was short, but on that clear morning, every step felt heavy. Birds chirped in the trees that lined the street, unaware of the tension that gripped this family. Amara took deep breaths of cool air, steadying herself. She tried to remember that her truth was more powerful than fear. When they reached the courthouse steps, a cluster of reporters stood behind yellow tape. Cameras and microphones pointed toward the entrance. Carolyn gently guided Amara away from the press, toward a side door marked defendants and family. The hallway inside smelled of polished wood and old carpet. Lawyers in dark suits moved past, folders clutched under their arms. The muffled sound of voices drifted through closed doors. In the waiting area, the defense attorney, Mr. Green, greeted them with a reassuring nod. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a calm manner. He had reviewed Amara's evidence the night before and believed they had a strong case for dismissal. He whispered to Carolyn that they would ask the judge to view the cafe footage right away and to call Mrs. Delgado first, so her testimony could set the timeline clearly. Amara's stomach fluttered as she sat in a wooden chair. She watched other defendants and their families, each absorbed in their own worries. Some mothers held children close, some men stood with shoulders hunched. Amara felt both out of place, and yet part of this crowded human story. She reminded herself that she was not guilty, that the truth was on her side. Soon a clerk called their names. State of Riverside versus Amara Williams. Defense, please follow me. The door to the courtroom opened, and a hush fell as they entered. The room was larger than she remembered. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, rows of benches filled with people. At the front, the judge sat behind a raised desk, flanked by the state's prosecutor. A court reporter tapped away at a stenotype machine, capturing every word. Amara's heart pounded as she walked down the center aisle. Reporters leaned forward, cameras clicking. She focused on the defense table in front of her, where Mr. Green stood ready. Carolyn and Marcus sat behind him, their faces tense but supportive. Amara took her seat, smoothing her skirt. She held her folder on her lap, feeling its weight. The prosecutor, Ms. Barnes, stood and began the state's case. She spoke in a clear, even tone. Last night, a fight broke out at the community center. When two men argued over missing money, one man fell to the ground, bleeding from his head. An eyewitness claimed to see a young girl helping the escaped man to his car. The witness described her clothes and her height, matching Amara's general appearance. Ms. Barnes clicked through photos of the incident on a screen. Amara's stomach tightened each time she saw the grainy image of a dark figure in the parking lot. She tried not to look at it, knowing it did not show her face clearly. Ms. Barnes called the eyewitness, a teenage boy named Derek, to the stand. He wore a hoodie and a nervous expression. Under questioning, he said he saw Amara standing by the car with one of the men, handing him what looked like car keys. His voice shook as he spoke, but his testimony was firm. I'm sure it was her. Mr. Green rose to cross-examine. He spoke gently, asking Derek about the lighting in the parking lot, about how far away he was, about how quickly the incident happened. Derek admitted it was dark and that he was running away when he glanced back. He said he saw movement but could not be certain of every detail. Ms. Barnes patiently reminded the jury that memory could be imperfect, but sometimes even imperfect memory was all the court had. Next, the state called a police officer who handled the scene. He described collecting Amara's fingerprints from a doorknob at her home, but not from the car or from the community center. That detail caused a stir. Fingerprints at home proved nothing. Ms. Barnes acknowledged that, but she insisted it added to the timeline of Amara's involvement. Amara sat very still as the testimony unfolded. She looked at her mother and saw tears in Caroline's eyes. She squeezed her notebook, feeling the reassurance of its pages. Then she thought of the cafe camera. No one had mentioned that yet, and she trusted Mr. Green to bring it up. She glanced at him, gave her a small nod of encouragement. When the state rested, there was a short recess. The judge left the bench and people stood or shifted in their seats. Reporters gathered outside the courtroom doors to compare notes. Caroline took Amara's hand and led her to a corner of the hallway. "You're doing great," she whispered. Marcus hugged her leg and whispered, "I love you." Amara hugged him back, feeling the warmth of his small body against her. Back inside, Mr. Green stood before the judge. He began the defense by presenting evidence of Amara's whereabouts. He called Mrs. Delgado, the neighbor, to the stand. The elderly woman took the oath and spoke in a clear voice. At 7:20. Last night, I saw Amara through my peephole. She was returning from the mailbox with a letter in her hand. I watched her walk upstairs to her apartment. She pointed to Amara, who felt a flutter of hope. I spoke to her through the door for a moment, told her I had some spare soup if she wanted it. She thanked me and went inside. Mr. Green handed the judge a diagram of the apartment building, marking Mrs. Delgado's door and Amara's. He asked Mrs. Delgado how long she saw her neighbor. The woman said about 2 minutes. When asked if she saw Amara leave again, she shook her head. She did not come back out. The judge glanced at the diagram, then at the clerk. "Present any additional evidence you have," he instructed. Mr. Green nodded and motioned to an aide waiting by the door. The aide carried a USB drive. Mr. Green inserted it into the judge's computer and clicked to play the cafe security footage. Grainy footage filled the large screen behind the bench. It showed the cafe's front entrance at 7:30. A girl walked by, carrying a stack of books and wearing the same jacket Amara always wore. She glanced at her watch, looked up at the streetlight, and continued on her way. The camera did not show the parking lot where the incident had occurred. A murmur rose in the courtroom as people recognized the jacket and the girl's posture. Ms. Barnes stood, frowning. "Your Honor, we have not had time to verify the authenticity of this video," she said. "It may have been altered." Mr. Green responded calmly, "We have a sworn statement from the cafe manager confirming the tape is genuine. We can provide that now." He passed a paper to the clerk. The judge read quickly, then turned to the jury. "Members of the jury, you may consider this video alongside other evidence." Silence followed. The jury leaned in, watching the blurry image of Amara walking home. The judge looked thoughtful, his brow furrowed. Amara felt her heart catch. This was the moment she had prepared for. She closed her eyes for a second, drawing strength from her notebook's promise. "Speak your truth." The court recessed for lunch. Amara closed her folder, relief washing over her. Caroline hugged her, and Mr. Green patted her shoulder. "You were brave," he said. "Rest now, then we finish this." Outside, the sun shone brightly as though cheering her on. As Amara ate a sandwich in the hall, she thought of the afternoon to come. There would be more questions, more tests of her resolve. But she also felt the weight of evidence shifting away from the false witness statements. She pictured the judge reviewing the tape, the jury reconsidering Derek's hurried glance. Hope blossomed in her chest. When the court reconvened, Amara would be ready. She would stand and with one clear line, "I wasn't there." She would speak the truth that no rumor or mistake could change. And in that honest moment, she would reclaim her story. The courtroom settled into a tense silence as everyone returned from lunch. Amara sat quietly at the defense table, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her notebook. She felt both calm and alert, like a runner poised at the starting line. Across the room, the prosecution team whispered among themselves. While the jury members flipped their notebooks closed one by one, the judge rapped his gavel gently and the room fell still. "Mr. Green," the judge said, his voice clear, "you may call your next witness or have your defendant speak." Mr. Green stood and gave a reassuring look to Amara. He motioned toward her. "Your Honor, the defense rests, and we would like to call Miss Amara Williams to speak on her own behalf." Amara's heart fluttered, but she took a deep breath. She rose from her chair and walked to the witness stand. Each step felt heavy, but she kept her head up, focusing on the judge's bench. As she climbed the small steps, she reminded herself of the promise she had made to speak her truth simply and clearly. She sat down on the hard wooden stool, buckling the strap across her waist. The judge's gaze met hers, steady and expectant. "Miss Williams," the judge began kindly, "you have heard the evidence against you, including witness testimony and video footage. This is your opportunity to tell the court whatever you wish, in your own words." Amara closed her eyes. For a brief moment, steadying herself, she pictured her mother's encouraging smile and her brother's trusting eyes. Then she opened her eyes and looked at the judge. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "I wasn't there." The simple statement echoed through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously and jurors leaned forward. Even the prosecution team paused, surprised by her calm clarity. The judge raised an eyebrow, his expression one of curiosity. Amara felt a small surge of confidence. This one line carried all the weight of her innocence. "I know it might sound too simple," she continued, "but it is the truth. I was at home that night. I studied for my biology test until my lamp went out. I did not see the fight. I did not help anyone escape from that scene. Had no part in it." She paused, letting the words sink in. A soft murmur ran through the courtroom as people exchanged glances. Amara held the judge's eye, her own steady and honest. She fingered the corner of a page in her notebook and then spoke again. "I have evidence that shows where I was and what I was doing. My neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, saw me come home at exactly 7:20. She spoke to me through the door and offered me soup. I was inside my apartment after that. Then I went to bed." She paused again, and Mr. Green handed her the printed statement from Mrs. Delgado. Amara looked down at it, her voice clear and precise as she summarized the key points. Mrs. Delgado's statement confirms, "I was inside my home, safe and alone. She did not see me leave again." Amara placed the paper on the stand and continued. "Then there is the cafe security video. Shows me walking past the cafe at 7:30. I see the camera in my school uniform and my favorite jacket. That video is from a cafe 2 blocks from my home at the same time the incident happened. Elsewhere in the neighborhood, it is clear I was nowhere near the community center parking lot." The judge nodded thoughtfully, and the jurors took notes. Amara sensed the momentum shifting. She felt as if invisible scales were balancing in her favor. She took another breath and added, "I understand that people make mistakes. Memories can be unclear when something unexpected happens. But trusting those mistakes over clear proof can hurt innocent people. I ask you to look at all the evidence together, not just one witness's view in the dark." Her words hung in the air. A hush covered the room. Amara felt a strange calm settle in her chest. She believed that telling this simple truth could free her from the fear and suspicion she had carried for days. "Thank you," she said quietly, and Mr. Green guided her back to the defense table. She sat down, her legs steady, her mind clear. The prosecution rose swiftly. Ms. Barnes adjusted her glasses and approached the jury. "Members of the jury," she began in a measured tone, "we have heard an emotional plea from Miss Williams. She has presented evidence that places her at home and walking past a cafe at the time of the incident. However, I urge you to consider whether any of this evidence could be tampered with or misinterpreted." She gestured toward the video. "That footage is grainy. Could it be someone else wearing the same jacket? Could the timestamp be off by minutes? These are questions we must ask to ensure we do not let a guilty person go free," Mara felt. The familiar nod of worry returned, but she also remembered that the judge had already accepted the evidence. She watched the jury, whose faces looked thoughtful. Some seemed doubtful, others attentive. She hoped they would see her truth. Ms. Barnes called an expert witness, a detective who specialized in video analysis. He spoke in calm, clear sentences about how security cameras work. He explained that timestamps could be adjusted if the clock was set incorrectly, how angles could hide details, how lighting could change the appearance of a person's features. He showed examples from other cases. Mara listened, trying not to let her hope slip away. When the detective finished, Mr. Green stood again. He asked the detective if the cafe camera had a reliable internal clock and if the manager had confirmed the time settings. The detective answered that the camera was connected to a network that synced time daily, that the manager's written statement confirmed this. The detective also testified that no signs of video editing were found when he inspected the tape. The judge asked if there were any more questions. Ms. Barnes shook her head. The judge turned to Mr. Green. "Anything further?" he asked. Mr. Green smiled and shook his head. "The defense rests, Your Honor." The judge closed his notebook and leaned back. "Thank you, counsel. We'll hear closing arguments after a brief recess." He rapped the gavel, and the jurors filed out to deliberate. Back in the hallway, Amara leaned against a cool marble pillar. Caroline rushed to her side, tears of relief shining in her eyes. Marcus hugged her waist, and Mr. Green offered a proud nod. "You did wonderfully. he said. Amara closed her eyes and let the warmth of their support wash over her. After 40 minutes, the jurors returned. They filed in silently, taking their seats. Amara sat up straight, her heart pounding. The judge called the court to order. Ms. Barnes spoke first. She summarized the state's case. The eyewitness saw someone who looked like Amara. The fingerprints placed her at home, but did not explain how she might have been involved. And the possibility of error in video evidence remained, she reminded the jury that reasonable doubt must be based on concrete proof, not emotion. Mr. Green then gave his closing. He spoke softly, but firmly about truth and evidence. He reminded the jury of Mrs. Delgado's clear statement, the reliable timestamp on the cafe video, and the lack of any direct link between Amara and the crime scene. He asked them to consider that the state had not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Amara was ever at the scene of the incident. He urged them to find her not guilty. Amara watched the jurors, whose expressions varied from reflective to sympathetic. The judge instructed them on the law. They must find Amara not guilty unless they were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of her guilt. Then he sent them to deliberate. The room emptied slowly. Amara and her family waited in the gallery. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the jury filed back in, expressionless. The judge asked for the foreperson's verdict. Not guilty, the foreperson said clearly. A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Amara's knees felt weak, and Caroline covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Marcus cheered quietly, punching his fist in the air. The judge smiled and said, "By the power vested in me, I hereby declare the defendant not guilty on all charges. You are free to go." The gavel fell, and the courtroom burst into murmurs of surprise and excitement. Reporters crowded the doors, but Amara and her family slipped out quickly. Outside, Caroline hugged her daughter tightly as Marcus danced around them. Amara closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The fear, the doubt, the long days of waiting all seemed to fade. She had spoken her one line, simple but true. I wasn't there. And that truth, backed by honest evidence, had saved her. She looked up at the bright sky and smiled, ready to reclaim her life. The courtroom fell into tense silence as the clerk wheeled in a small television on a cart. Amara's heart pounded when she saw it. She remembered the promise her lawyer made. New footage from the cafe's security camera would show her walking safely past, and nothing more. Yet she felt unease, as if her fate rested on images more reliable than human memory. The judge watched the cart roll forward. Porters leaned in, cameras raised. Amara sat with her mother and brother behind her. Caroline gripped Marcus's hand, whispering, "Stay close." Marcus looked at the screen with wide eyes, wondering what would happen next. Mr. Green stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, this video was obtained last night from the Sunrise Cafe. It covers the time of the incident at the community center. We believe it will confirm Miss Williams's location at the crucial moment." Pressed a remote and the screen blinked to life. A grainy black and white image appeared. The timestamp read 1930. The camera pointed at the cafe's front door, showing the sidewalk and part of the street. A few pedestrians passed by. Amara leaned forward. There, wearing her usual jacket, was a young girl carrying a stack of notebooks. It was herself, unmistakably her posture, her hair tied in a ponytail. Amara exhaled slowly. Proof at last. The judge studied the screen as the video played. She walked by the cafe, glanced at her watch, and kept going. 10 seconds before the feed ended, the judge glanced at the clerk. "Is there more?" Mr. Green said, "Yes, Your Honor. There's another clip from a different camera one behind the cafe, covering the alley that leads toward the community center parking lot. It was recently discovered on a separate hard drive with its own timestamp." He signaled the clerk, who swapped tapes and pressed play again. The new footage loaded. It showed the cafe's back alley. There was nobody at first. Then, at 1929, a figure appeared. A dark shape moved quickly, reached under a parked car, and pulled out a small object. The figure stood up and walked away, disappearing from view by 1930. The image was shadowy, but the shape matched the jacket the eyewitness described. It was not Amara. She had been in front of the cafe, not crouched in that alley. A gasp rose from the courtroom. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. "Mr. Green, can you enhance this image? We need clarity on who this figure is." Mr. Green shook his head. "No, Your Honor. The footage is from an older camera with low resolution. But we have evidence about the angle and timing." He held up a printed statement. "The cafe's manager confirms that the back alley camera runs on a separate recorder, did not stop recording, and its clock is accurate." He passed the statement to the clerk. The judge skimmed it and nodded. Ms. Barnes, the prosecutor, rose. Her face was tight. "Your Honor, this footage is not directly connected to the crime scene. We have no proof that what this figure did in the alley is related. And if it is related, we do not know who it is." She folded her arms and eyed Amara. "We must remain focused on the eyewitness testimony." Amara felt a sinking feeling. The witness's words, though uncertain, still held power. She saw her brother's small hand reach for hers, and she squeezed it tightly. She believed in her innocence and, now she hoped the judge would. The judge leaned back. "Let's hear from the cafe manager directly." He turned to Mr. Green. "Will you call him to the stand?" Mr. Green nodded. He motioned to a tall, thin man in a gray sweater who stood at the back. The man's name was Mr. Lee. He took the oath and sat in the witness chair. The judge asked, "Mr. Lee, please tell the court what you observed regarding these two security cameras." Mr. Lee cleared his throat. His voice was soft but confident. "The front door camera records continuously on recorder A. The back alley camera records on recorder B, which is independent. We installed it after a minor break-in last year. Both recorders sync with the building's network time daily." He held up a printout showing the network settings. "They are accurate within a second." The judge nodded. Mr. Green asked, "Did you personally retrieve these recordings?" "Yes," Mr. Lee replied. "I searched recorder B late last night after I learned about the case. I found the clip and gave it to Mr. Green. I did not edit it in any way." Ms. Barnes asked, "Could someone have tampered with recorder B? Could the tape have been replaced?" Mr. Lee shook his head. "No. The recorder is locked in a cabinet. Only I have the key. The video files have metadata showing continuous recording. There are no gaps." The judge studied Mr. Lee. Then he looked at the jury. "Members of the jury, you now have evidence from two independent cameras. One shows the defendant walking past the cafe at the time in question. The other shows an unknown figure in the back alley at nearly the same time. Keep that in mind." The judge turned to Ms. Barnes. She looked unsettled but rose to speak. "Your Honor, I still believe the eyewitness testimony matters. Memory can be strong in stressful moments." She hesitated. "But I have nothing further at this time." Mr. Green closed his notebook. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge nodded and dismissed Mr. Lee. The defense and prosecution returned to their tables. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge addressed the jury. "I will now review the evidence before you proceed with deliberations." He paused, then called for a short break, sending the jury out. The gavel fell, and the courtroom emptied. Except for the lawyers and the judge. Amara's knees felt weak. Caroline placed a hand on her shoulder. Mr. Green offered a reassuring smile. "This is the moment we've waited for," he whispered. "The judge has seen that both cameras back your story. Now, the jury will decide." Amara nodded, though her heart still raced. She thought of the dark alley footage, the unknown figure planting the object. She thought of her own footsteps in front of the cafe. These images carried truth better than any human memory. After a few minutes, the jury re-entered. The judge called the court to order. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you have seen the video evidence provided by both sides. You may now deliberate and reach your verdict based on all the facts presented." The jurors filed out again, leaving the courtroom empty and echoing. Amara, Caroline, and Marcus waited in the gallery. Caroline whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Marcus tucked under Amara's arm. Amara closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. Outside, the afternoon sun shone brightly through the tall windows For a moment, the courtroom seemed less daunting. In that light, Amara remembered why she had fought so hard to clear her name, to stand for what was right, and to show that truth, however simple, could shine through doubt. The jury returned after only 20 minutes. They filed in, sat down, and the foreperson stood. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson cleared her throat. "We have, Your Honor. We find the defendant not guilty." A wave of relief washed over Amara. Her mother wept softly. Marcus let out a cheer, clapping his small hands. The judge smiled and declared, "The court finds Amara Williams not guilty on all counts. You are free to go." The gavel fell. Courtroom erupted in whispers and camera clicks. Amara stood, tears in her eyes, and hugged her mother and brother. Outside the courtroom doors, reporters flocked to hear her story. But Amara only cared about her family waiting for her. As they walked down the steps, Caroline wrapped her arms around Amara. Marcus skipped beside them. Amara breathed in the fresh air, tasting freedom at last. The shocking video had revealed the truth, and in its light, she found justice and a chance to begin anew. Amara stepped out of the courthouse into bright afternoon light, her steps light as if she floated above the ground. Her mother, Caroline, was waiting at the bottom of the wide stone steps, her eyes shining and her arms open. Marcus ran ahead and caught Amara in a tight hug, his small body trembling with excitement. Amara bent down and wrapped her arms around him, feeling his warmth and his relief in that simple embrace. She breathed in the scent of her family, fresh laundry on her, mother's coat, the faint trace of Marcus's bubblegum-flavored lip balm, and let the moment fill her with joy. Caroline linked arms with her and guided her to the sidewalk where reporters stood behind a low barricade. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and voices called out questions. "Amara, how do you feel? What will you do next?" But Amara kept her gaze on her mother and brother. She felt grateful for their love and for the judge who had seen the truth. She thought of her lawyer, Mr. Green, and how he had believed in her from the start. She planned to thank him later, but now, her heart belonged entirely to her family. They walked slowly down the block toward home. Neighbors who had gathered along the way cheered and waved. Mrs. Delgado, standing by her front gate, gave Amara a thumbs up and a broad smile. Amara waved back, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized how many people had stood by her. Her principal, who retrieved the cafe footage, her teacher, who wrote a letter of support, even the cafe manager who confirmed the security tapes. Each person had woven a thread of kindness and truth into a safety net that caught her when she needed it most. As they turned the corner onto their street, Marcus skipped ahead, calling out, "Tell me again how you said just one line." Amara laughed and squeezed her brother's hand. "I said I wasn't there," she reminded him gently. He hopped with excitement. "That was all? That simple?" He sounded amazed. Amara smiled at him. "Sometimes the truth is simple, but it takes courage to say it." Marcus nodded, as if she had just shared a great secret. At home, the apartment felt smaller, but filled with new light. Caroline made sandwiches and hot apple cider, while Amara and Marcus laid out their school books at the kitchen table.
Holiday.
Wanted to celebrate in a simple way, a quiet evening of laughter and comfort. Caroline smiled across the table. "You saved your future today," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Amara felt a lump in her throat and blinked back tears. She looked at Marcus, who grinned and said to Amara, "The bravest girl in the world." They ate their sandwiches, and Amara told them how it felt to stand in court to speak her one line, and to see the judge and jury accept her evidence. She described how her heart pounded when the cafe video played, how it felt to see her own image walking past that camera. Caroline listened, her hand on Amara's arm, and Marcus peppered her with questions. "Did you see yourself clearly? Was it scary? Did the judge smile when he saw you?" After dinner, Caroline brought out Amara's notebook, the one she always carried. It was worn at the edges, its pages filled with neat handwriting and drawings. She opened it to the first page, where Amara had written, "I will not let them define me by a lie." Caroline read it aloud, her voice soft. Amara looked at those words, written when she first learned of the charges, and felt how far she had come. She ran her finger over the lines. "I kept my promise," she said. Caroline smiled and hugged her. The next day, news of the case spread beyond the neighborhood. The video clips circulated on social media, shared by people who praised Amara's courage and called for changes in how the justice system handled eyewitness accounts. Comments appeared under the posts, a powerful reminder to seek the truth. Always check the evidence. Brave young woman shows us all how to stand up for justice. Amara read some of the messages with Caroline and Marcus by her side. Some were kind, others thoughtful questions about fairness, but none were mean. They were words of support and hope. In class that morning, Amara felt nervous yet excited. She wondered if students would stare or whisper. But when she walked into the room, her classmates greeted her with smiles and cheers. Some patted her back. Others said congrats. Teacher, Ms. Harvey, stood near the front and clapped lightly. "We are proud of you, Amara," she said. "You showed honesty and strength." Amara felt her cheeks warm, but her smile was true. She realized she had not just cleared her name, she had inspired others to believe in speaking the truth. During lunch, a small group of students gathered around her table. They asked about the court, about how she kept calm, about what she thought when the video played. Amara answered simply, in her honest way. "I trusted what I knew was true, and I trusted the evidence would show it." They nodded in admiration. Some said they wanted to volunteer at the community center like she did. Amara felt happy that her experience might help others learn to help younger kids with homework or art. She thought of the murals she and Marcus had painted at the center last summer and smiled at the memory. That afternoon, a letter arrived. From the judge himself, and at a court seal and a short note. "Dear Miss Williams, your courage and honesty reminded us all of the power of truth. Continue to speak your voice, and may it always guide you in fairness and grace. Sincerely, Judge Reynolds."
Amara
held the letter close to her heart. She read it to Carolyn, whose eyes filled with tears again. "Keep this," Carolyn said. "It's a reminder of your strength." In the days that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Amara returned to her morning routine of walking to school, volunteering at the community center after classes, and studying her notebooks at night. Yet something had shifted. She no longer carried the weight of fear. Instead, she felt a light confidence, as if the truth she spoke had given her wings. She found herself smiling more, laughing more, and even speaking up in class in a way she had not before. One evening, as the sun set in pink and gold, Amara sat on the balcony with Marcus. He leaned against her, munching on popcorn. They watched as neighbors watered their gardens and children chased fireflies. Marcus turned to Amara and said, "I'm glad everything turned out okay." Amara hugged him and whispered, "Me too, little brother." She thought of her journey, the worry, the court, the single line that changed everything, the video that shocked everyone, and the judge who saw the truth. She felt grateful for every step. Later, when she closed her eyes that night, Amara dreamed of bright places. A courtroom filled with light, her mother's proud face, the community center's murals, the judge's letter on her desk. She held the image of her own words, "I wasn't there," and turned them over in her mind. Those simple words had carried her through a storm. She realized that truth, spoken bravely, could save a life and inspire a community. And so when she woke up the next morning, she carried that lesson with her. She knew her story would stay with her always, but it would not define her. Instead, it would remind her of the power she held, the power to speak honestly, to stand for what is right, and to trust that one clear voice could shine light into the darkest places. With that thought, Amara stepped into a new day, ready to live her truth and help others do the same.